So when we talk about overcoming imposter syndrome, so what is it? That's kind of one of the main things that we're going to be talking about today, which is, of course, when an individual believes that they are inadequate, incompetent, and likely to fail despite evidence that shows that they are skilled and successful. And what that tends to do is it results in them not being able to internalize at all the successes or the accomplishments that they actually have. And so one great thing, not even a great thing necessarily, but that imposter syndrome is a symptom of success. That's kind of the one thing we want folks to remember. So it tends to feel a lot like this, that everyone around you, you seem to think they all have it together. And you're the only one who seems to be floundering, or you're just grasping at straws, or everyone seems to have it together and I don't. So when you talk about imposter syndrome, the research kind of showing that 70% of folks are going to experience this at some time in their careers, whether in their education or outside of their education, and it's more common in women, people of color, and people with working class roots. If you came from a family that was working class, or if you are actually maybe are transitioning to from a working class career into something that's more a white collar career, that can be part of it as well. New challenges, or even new projects. So if it's an exam, a project, a new job, switching to a new space, this can all kind of trigger that imposterism that we all try to keep under control. And also it happens with, it's more common for folks who grew up with a gifted sibling or were labeled gifted themselves. That also tends to be one of the, quote, at-risk factors for experiencing imposter syndrome. And so it's not a mental disorder, but it is problematic thinking that tends to accompany anxiety, depression, and other mental disorders. So it's associated with a lot of thoughts such as, I must not fail, failure isn't an option, it would be too much, I feel like a fake, I have no clue what I'm doing, why did anyone think I could do this? I just got lucky. They'll soon see that I didn't deserve to get into vet school. They'll soon see I didn't deserve this job. They'll soon see that I really just got lucky on this exam. You know, these are kind of the thoughts that go through our head. So when we talk about the 6 dimensions of imposter syndrome, we have our imposter cycle, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The 3 fears of failure, which is evaluation, not continuing success, and not being as capable as others. Characteristics of the super person, which we'll also touch on. Denial of ability and discounting of praise. Feeling fear and guilt about success, particularly if you come from a working class background. Some folks may say, I was able to do well, I was able to have success, and I have other family who didn't, according to our mainstream idea of what success is, right? So there's kind of this, in a way, what some people term as survivor's guilt, that they were able to shift out of a poor socioeconomic status, and the need to be special or the best. And so the researchers kind of said that there needs to be at least 2 aspects present. So when we talk about this imposter cycle, we're going to see that usually everyone starts right up here. This project or your piece of work, or even your challenge, like a new job or an exam or whatever it is. And so you start, when you're given this assignment or this project that you're working on, you immediately start to feel anxiety, self-doubt, and some worry. And this either leads to imposter folks either over-preparing or feeling some procrastination. And when the accomplishment happens, when either of these 2 efforts bring about a positive outcome or a success through either effort or luck, there's this feeling of relief, the positive feedback that they get from other people that they in turn then really push away because of feeling like a fake, self-doubt, depression, anxiety. And so it goes back to this, oh, it was all just luck because I procrastinated, I didn't prepare, or I over-prepared because I feel unknowledgeable, I feel insecure. They'll find out that I'm a fake, so I'm going to over-prepare and see, I fooled them. That's kind of those feelings that go through our head. And then it starts back up again with the next piece of work that you're going to be working on. So that's kind of the cycle that folks kind of go through. So there's 5 types of imposters. We have the perfectionist, the expert, the rugged individualist, the natural genius, and the super person. So when you talk about the perfectionist is very much about the, if I want something done right, I have to do it myself. These are the people who hate group projects. I hate group projects, but these people very much hate group projects. And have you ever been accused of being a micromanager? Do you have difficulty delegating to others? And do you feel that 100% of your work must be 100% perfect 100% of the time? There's no room for failure. There's no wiggle room for it not being perfect. When we talk about the super person, it's this workaholic feeling that you're addicted to the validation that comes from work, not from the work itself. And when we say that validation that comes from work, It's a validation that we're putting on our work. I think that we see this a lot in medicine and any type of medicine, is that we see folks who have put so much time and energy, so many years of their lives into something, into an education and into the resulting career, that if I wasn't working, what would I be? If I wasn't a veterinarian, what would I be doing? If I wasn't a doctor? And so we tend to wrap a lot of our identity in our work. And so that's kind of where this validation is coming from. It's an identity validation. And so do you ever stay later than others, perhaps even past the time your work is completed? Are you stressed or anxious when you're not working and find downtime wasteful? Is it easy for you to sacrifice your hobbies and interests for work? The natural genius is this person who, such in that section of when we talked about the cycle with procrastination and then through, quote, luck, has that success. These are folks who they judge themselves based on their abilities, not on their efforts. They're used to excelling without much effort. They have to get it right or do it right the first time, or they're just bad at it, so they kind of avoid doing it. If they're not going to perform well, or when they don't perform well the first time, they feel a lot of shame because they have been raised to think that this should be natural. I should just have this ability. I should be naturally good at this. And so they tend to avoid trying new things in order to avoid possibly failing. So the rugged individualist is very much, I think, a part of American culture. We're very much kind of built on this rugged individualism, but it can really manifest itself in imposter syndrome when you kind of have this idea of, I don't need anyone but myself. I don't need anyone's help. I can do this through sheer grit. I can make this happen. So you refuse assistance from others in order to prove your worth. That's once again that idea of personal validation coming from doing it by yourself. Do you firmly feel that you must always accomplish things on your own? Do you frame requests in terms of the requirements of the project rather than your needs as a person? So are you willing to sacrifice any sort of self to get the work done? And then we have the expert. So this is an expert. The person is someone who has a deep fear of being exposed as inexperienced or knowledgeable, shy away from applying to jobs unless they meet every single requirement. They have to meet every single requirement to think that they're remotely qualified. And do you constantly seek out additional training certificates because you feel that you're not enough? Do you shudder when someone calls you an expert? And even when you're in the role for a while, do you still feel not good enough? So we see this a lot as well. And I will, in the spirit of vulnerability for everyone here, I will tell you my imposter story. So I am the little fox in a sea of beagles. And it's really difficult for me sometimes when I was born and raised in Alaska. I grew up in a very working class home. And through a lot of things where I went off and I was the first woman in my family to finish college and then go on and do a graduate program and then eventually go on and I worked at Harvard and now I work at Cornell. And so when you're in some of these environments, I felt very much like an imposter. I pulled the wool over everyone's eyes. I was a wolf in sheep's clothing. I was making it all up is how it felt. So when we talk about the expert, this is what this looks like. When you go through additional trainings and trainings and trainings and trainings to try to compensate for this feeling of inadequacy. This is the first 2/3 of the first page of my resume. So many certificates because I need to know more, I need to know more, I need to know more, which is not bad, but it shows that for me, I was feeling my imposter syndrome through not feeling like I was worthy to be in some of these spaces, which is not true. But one thing that this also was doing for me was that this was preventing me from actually thinking that I could go out and do the work that I wanted to do. I thought, no, I have to get one more training, one more certificate, one more degree. I have to do something else before I can go out and do the thing I want to do. And what that was doing to me was procrastinating what I needed to do. So when I start new jobs, I go through a lot of feelings. Mostly the same two over and over again. It's gonna make a mistake. They made a huge mistake that they hired me. They're gonna find out, they're gonna find out. So it's a lot of going through my first 2 weeks, feeling like they're just gonna think that this is totally fine, everything is great. They suspect nothing. I still have them fooled. So when I go through this, and they ask me, Makenzie, can you give a presentation on imposter syndrome? I'm like, I'll be found. This is it, this is the moment. They'll find me out. So we're all in this together, is what I'm really trying to say. We all are experiencing this through certain times in our lives. And even when we have it under control, like we said with that cycle, certain new challenges may make that imposterism come back again. And so it's always an ongoing process that we do. We'll have it under control, it peaks and spikes, we have to manage that again, and we get it back down again. So 10 ways that we can overcome imposter syndrome. One is that we have to break the silence about it. I know that a lot of folks feel like, oh, I can't tell anyone that I feel inadequate or that I feel like I'm unknowledgeable, because then that might make them think, wow, if they think that, there must be something to it. No, that's not the case. We all have moments where we are very knowledgeable, and we know what we're talking about, but that doesn't mean we can't feel that way. And just because we feel stupid doesn't mean we are stupid, right? I mean, there's that reality of it. Your feelings are not your facts. So don't be afraid to say what you're experiencing. You're not alone, and you're in really good company. Albert Einstein, the exaggerated esteem in my life work is held, makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler. This is Albert Einstein. And the good company that you're in, the former head of WHO, Pulitzer Prize winner Serena Williams, the most successful tennis player of all time. Men, women, everyone, the most successful. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, and my favorite, Maya Angelou. All these people have felt and have publicly said that they feel imposter syndrome. And they're very successful. In your head, you're thinking, there's no reason why they would think that they weren't good enough. But like I said, imposter syndrome is a symptom of success. So the next thing we need to do is we separate feelings from facts. Like I said, our feelings are not facts. Just because we feel inadequate or just because we feel like we don't know anything does not mean that's the case. So we think with imposter syndrome, what I know is a small thing compared to what everyone else knows, when in reality, we know a little bit of what a lot of people know. And they know a little bit about what we know. And we can all share that together. We all work together on that. And so we need to recognize when we feel like a fraud. What are the moments where we feel the most fraudulent? Is it when we start new jobs? Is it when we're taking on new projects, maybe with another person who intimidates us? Is it when, we have, when we find ourselves being the only woman in the room, or when we find ourselves being the only minority? Those are the times when we can realize, wow, okay, these are the things that are happening that make me feel this way. And so once we can do that, we can realize that just because we feel like an outsider does not mean that our self-doubt means ineptness. It's not the same thing. They don't equate to each other. Another thing you can do is you can know your rights. You have the right to be wrong sometimes. We're not going to be right all the time. You have the right to have a day off that is just, hey, I have an off day, it's just not working. I have that right to be forgetful. You have a right to be a human. You have a right to make mistakes and to be forgiven, and you move on. You have those rights. You're not expected to be perfect. So we also need to develop a new response to our failures. When we do make mistakes, when things don't work out, how do we approach that? Do we go at it again and say, okay, this is a failure that I actually can learn from, not a failure that means I never look at this again, I never touch this again, this was awful. Like how we talked about with the natural genius, when they aren't good at something the first time, they'll avoid it. So this is what we need to do when we have a new response to failure. Okay, it didn't work the first time. What can I do differently when I try it again? And this is what this will do. So that was our external, that's our behavior, but this is internal when we develop a new script. So in our minds, we're thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. When what we need to have going on in our minds is everyone who starts something new feels off base in the beginning. I may not know all the answers, but I'm smart enough to find them out. And I just really want folks to settle in on that last sentence. You may not know, but you can find it out, and you're smart enough to find it out. Another thing is visualizing success. That's also one thing that helps folks. I know it seems sort of like a sports psychology, like be the ball, imagine the ball going into the net. It's kind of the same thing. There's a reason why sports psychology works for a lot of athletes, and it works for us. And a lot of folks here, they're academic athletes. And it's this idea of I'm successfully doing this presentation, I'm clearly posing a question in class, I'm calmly taking an exam. And this is all to help you with your performance-related stress. We also need to accentuate the positive, such as when a perfectionist will say, this didn't work out, it wasn't 100% perfect, and they'll point out every small thing about what wasn't perfect. But there were 8 million things that went well. And so it's the focus on things that went well, gone well, will go well in the future. We need to focus on those. It helps us avoid that nihilist feeling. And also this idea of rewarding ourselves. We can go into the library and we can study 8 hours a day, and at the end of it all, get a B- on an exam, Reward yourself that you did really great study habits. Reward yourself that you put in lots of effort and that maybe you didn't get the A+, but you know what, B- is still pretty good, not shabby. And so we need to remind ourselves that you are in fact deserving of your accomplishments. I have some friends who keep a brag folder. They'll take screenshots of text messages they get from friends going, thank you so much for helping me study. It was so helpful, you're so smart. And that may seem like a flippant comment and even a compliment that they thought, but they kept it because they're like, you know what, even when I'm feeling stupid, when that ugly monster in the back of my head tells me I don't deserve to be somewhere, I pull those up and I just look at them and I let them know, okay, I really needed that, thank you. So it helps break that cycle of seeking for validation regarding this or that, or I want to go and do this project and I want to keep seeking for this. And then if someone tells you you got it, you did a great job, you're like, no. Like, don't dismiss that validation, okay? You got to break that cycle in your mind. And it's also about allowing your confidence to build. And the confidence builds, once again, when we seek our knowledge and we have our courage from taking calculated risks. So for some folks, a calculated risk may be completely changing their study habits, shifting from doing long marathons to doing short ones and hoping, crossing fingers, that it'll result in higher grades or retention of more information. And also calculated risk can be, I'm going into my boss's office and I'm asking for a raise. That can feel like a real high risk. But what we do is we triangulate that information, we do our research, we know what we need to do so we can come and approach that with more confidence. Once again, I may not know all the answers, but I'm smart enough to find them out. And the person, Valerie Young, Dr. Young, who kind of coined and had all this about imposter syndrome, said the fastest way to kick imposter syndrome is to adopt what I've dubbed the cardinal rule. Competence doesn't mean you need to know everything, to do it all yourself, or to do everything perfectly or effortlessly. Instead, competence is being able to identify the resources it takes to get the job done. So when we talk about imposter syndrome, and we talk about how this impacts our work, how this impacts our education, these are the things that we're thinking about, is feeling I have to figure this out all by myself. We don't think about triangulating our information, pulling people in. We don't think about how we make this actually a community where we talk about and acknowledge the fact that we all don't know everything. I don't know if any of us actually have the mental capacity to know everything. This is why we invent AI. This is why we do these things, so that we can house information, all the information somewhere else, and then we pull it when we need it. So this is what I really want folks to be able to remember and understand, is that you don't have to know everything. You just have to know where to find it. And when it comes to our imposter syndrome, this idea of validation and self-worth coming from the data we produce or the grades that we produce. I've seen that over and over and over again from people who have said, my parents didn't really care how my day was going, they just cared what my grades were on my exam. I don't feel like the chair of my department really cared about XYZ, they just wanted to see the data. It's like these are the things that you hear about our worth equating to what we produce. And I really want to break that myth. That's all part of imposter syndrome and part of our culture, which at times can be incredibly toxic because we're not looking at people as human beings. We're not addressing their needs. We go back to that rugged individualism, the perfectionism. They're all responses to our culture. And so I really hope that folks can think about that and see how in their own communities, in their own spaces of control, in their own friend groups, in their own families, how can they work to address that? How can they work to change that? How can they tell someone that they have value regardless of what they produce? Regardless of what they're showing, whether it's A+ or D- or Fs. Because when I have a student who fails out of vet school and they come to me saying, I'm worth nothing, I can't believe I have nothing to show for this, that's not the mental framework that I want them to approach this at. That's not going to help them. So how do we talk about resiliency? How do we talk about all these things together? So I really hope that folks can think about this as you go throughout your week and thinking about more and more what we can do as a community to help each other understand that we have each other's backs. We're here to help one another. And the goal is to have a really loving, connected community. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.